It started with a single sentence, "I'm going out tonight. I might not be back until tomorrow." She said it as she buttered her toast, as if she were mentioning a late meeting or a quick stop at the store. I paused my coffee mug halfway to my lips and turned my gaze to her. My voice, too calm, almost unnaturally so, seemed to betray nothing. She took a casual bite of her toast and glanced at her phone, her fingers scrolling through some endless list, a faint smirk on her lips. Arrogant. Shameless. "I'm going out tonight," she repeated, meeting my eyes with a bold, unchallenged stare. "I don't know when I'll be back, maybe tomorrow." That, maybe, was the tiniest, smug afterthought, as though I were supposed to accept this with resignation. She continued before I could respond, as if this were a simple, rational conversation between adults. "Look, it's not about you, it's about me. I got married too young, I never really got to explore. It's unfair to spend a lifetime with one person when there's so much out there to experience. Society forces us into these rigid expectations, it's unnatural," she sighed, playing the victim, the woman who had everything, a husband who adored her, a life most people dream of, while justifying her upcoming betrayal as a journey of personal growth. I set my mug down. "So you're telling me, to my face, that you're going to sleep with another man?" She flinched slightly, then recovered quickly, adopting an annoyed expression as if I were overreacting. "It's not about sex, cut the theatrics," I interrupted sharply for the first time. Her confidence wavered, she swallowed and then sighed. "Fine, yes, I want to sleep with someone else. I need to. I need to know what it's like before it's too late. But listen, it doesn't change anything between us. If anything, it'll make our marriage stronger. I'll be a better wife, more passionate, more devoted to you." She truly believed every word, and that was when I realized just how far gone she was. She assumed she had me figured out. She thought I would argue, get upset, then eventually accept it. She had no idea what was coming. I took a deep breath, letting the moment stretch, letting her believe she was winning, then I spoke. "I'd rather not." Her smirk faded. I leaned back in my chair, calm and unaffected. "I'd rather not let my wife sleep with another man." Her eyes narrowed. She hadn't expected this, she was expecting anger, desperation, jealousy. Instead, she received cold indifference. "You don't have a choice," she said, her voice sharper now. I just smiled. "Then neither do you." And just like that, the first crack appeared in her armor. She hadn't expected resistance. She thought she held all the cards, about to learn the hard way that I never played fair. That night, she left as she had planned. But while she was gone, I got to work. I didn't drown my sorrows in liquor or spend the night wallowing over the woman who had discarded everything we once had. No, I planned. Step 1, I dismantled her safety net. I froze every joint bank account, locked all credit cards, canceling those in her name and even the ones linked to mine. Savings were drained. She had forgotten that I was the one who managed our finances. Legally, the house belonged to me. She had no claim. The car was registered under my name. By the time she returned, she would have nothing. Step 2, I let her believe she still held control. I didn't message her. I didn't ask where she was. I didn't beg, call, or give her the reaction she craved. I simply let her have the night, because it would be her last Sunday evening. She strolled in, looking as if she owned the place. Her hair was disheveled, lipstick smudged, dark circles marking her eyes, exhausted but still smug. "Hey," she greeted casually, dropping her bag by the door. Guess I lost track of time. I didn't respond. I was at the grill, tending to a perfectly cooked ribeye steak, the rich aroma filling the air. Mouth-watering and enticing, the scent was a silent counterpoint to the tension. She walked closer, her eyes drifting toward the food. "Would you mind cooking one for me?" she asked, smiling slightly. I turned my head, letting her see the coldness in my eyes. With deliberate precision, I spoke the words that would haunt her forever. I'd rather not. She blinked, her face fell. In that moment, she knew she had lost control. I was just getting started. Her smirk was gone, her confidence shaken. She stood there, staring at me, processing, trying to comprehend what had just happened. "What do you want me to say?" I asked calmly. "Yell at me? Argue? Be mad? Just don't act like this, it's creepy." I took my time cutting into the steak, testing its doneness to perfection. Then I picked up my plate, my glass of wine, and walked inside without another word. I didn't need to, she was already unraveling. I could hear her moving around the kitchen later, opening the fridge, rummaging through the cabinets. Then came her panic. "Why are my credit cards not working?" The delicious panic in her voice was music to my ears. I took another sip of wine, flipping through a book in the lounge. Moments later, she stormed in, angry, confused, desperate. "Did you cancel my cards?" I didn't look up. "You don't have cards," I said simply. She blinked. "What are you talking about?" Her voice cut off as she sensed her control slipping. I could see the gears in her mind grinding as she realized I had drained my savings. "Where's my money?" she demanded. I turned the page. "Gone." She stared at me in silence, processing. "You froze my accounts," she whispered. "I'd rather not pay for your little adventures," I replied. Her breath hitched, now fear was taking hold. "You can't do that," she snapped, her voice rising. "That's illegal." "No, it's not," I countered. I finally set my book down and leaned back in my chair, watching her with cold amusement. "You forgot, I used to get everything before we got married. We signed a prenuptial agreement. You wanted to prove you weren't after my money. Remember?" Her mouth opened and closed in disbelief. "The agreement made it abundantly clear that in the event of infidelity, you get nothing." I smiled, slow, calculated, and cruel. "And guess what, sweetheart?" I continued, my voice dripping with mock sympathy. "You just admitted to sleeping with another man." Her face turned pale. "This isn't happening," she whispered. "Oh, it is happening." Her hands shook, I could see the fear creeping in. I need to call someone." "Your phone plan?" "Cancelled." "It was under my name too." "My car, also mine." "Check the title." She staggered back, as if I had struck her. "You can't just take everything from me," she screamed. I raised an eyebrow. "Funny, that's exactly what you tried to do to me," I said. Her chest heaved. She looked around the room, desperately searching for an escape that no longer existed. A long silence stretched between us until finally, she collapsed to her knees. "I made a mistake," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I was stupid, I just thought I needed something different, but now I see. God, I see it now. Please, please don't do this." I stood and walked toward her. She looked up, eyes brimming with tears. "I love you," she choked out. "Please, just give me a chance to make this right." I crouched down, tilting my head, and then uttered the word she would never forget. "I'd rather not." That night, she packed her bags, no choice left, no money, no home, no life. I watched from the doorway as she stood outside, lost, broken, destroyed. "Where will I go?" she whispered. I merely shrugged. Not my problem, I thought, as her eyes filled with tears. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, and without another word, she turned and walked into the night. And I closed the door for good. The divorce papers were filed. Her reputation was shattered, her friends abandoned her. Meanwhile, I thrived, dinners, dates, laughter, happiness. She became nothing more than a ghost of my past, a lesson learned. Because in the end, some betrayals are unforgivable, and some people simply don't deserve forgiveness. The house was silent after she left, no more footsteps echoing down the hall, no more forced conversations at the dinner table, no more fake laughter. Just peace, and I reveled in it. The first night after she was gone, I sat on the couch with a glass of whiskey, staring at the door from which she had disappeared. No anger, no regret, no sadness, just satisfaction. I had won. She thought she had all the power, all the control, but she never realized she was playing chess with the wrong man. The messages started 2 days later. I know you're mad, but please, let's talk. Her texts, filled with apologies and pleas, I read them with a smirk and ignored them. 3 days later, she showed up at the house. I watched through the window as she stood on the porch, shifting her weight from one foot to the other, looking lost. She knocked, I didn't answer. She knocked again, louder this time. I took another sip of whiskey and turned up the music. After a few minutes, I heard the frustrated cry of a soul breaking before she walked away. Good. Let her feel it. Let her drown in the consequences of her own actions. By the end of the first week, the messages changed. You're really going to do this to me? I was wrong, okay, but you can't just throw me away like this. You're cruel, heartless, I should have left you years ago. You're nothing without me. I laughed at that one, nothing. I was thriving while she was out there, struggling and drowning in regret. I was building something better. By the second week, the messages slowed, by the third, they stopped. She was beginning to realize that there was no coming back from this. Word spread quickly, she had no job, no home. No one wanted anything to do with her. The very friends she thought had her back were gone. The guy she assumed would welcome her with open arms used her and tossed her aside. She was sinking, and I was watching from a distance, savoring every second. A month passed, then one night she called. I saw her name flash on my phone and almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. Hello. I answered. Silence, then her voice, small, broken, defeated. I have nothing, she whispered. No one, no money, no place to go. I don't know what to do. I leaned back in my chair, smiling. And what does that have to do with me? I asked coolly. Please, I know I hurt you. I know I was selfish, but I'm lost, she pleaded. You chose this, I cut in, my tone calm and final. I gave you everything, and you threw it away. That was your decision. She sniffled. I just want to come home. I paused, letting the silence stretch, then in a voice so cold it could have frozen hell itself, I whispered, I'd rather not. And then I hung up. That was the last time I ever heard from her. A few months later, the divorce was finalized. She left town, vanished, nothing but a bitter memory. I moved on. I thrived, better, happier, stronger, because some betrayals are simply unforgivable, and some people aren't worth saving. After I hung up on her, I expected her to try again, to beg, to plead, to force her way back into my life. But she didn't. Later, I learned why she had hit rock bottom. She bounced from couch to couch, relying on so-called friends who quickly tired of her drama. The men she thought would take care of her used her and discarded her. She went from luxury to nothing, from being my wife to becoming homeless. And every time I thought about it, I felt nothing. She deserved it. The first time I went out after she was gone, I expected to feel something, sadness, regret, loss. But instead, I felt free. I laughed, I enjoyed myself, I lived for the first time in years. I wasn't trapped, and God, it felt good. I dated casually at first, but then I met someone who wasn't a liar, wasn't selfish, someone who looked at me like I was the only man in the world. And that's when I knew I had truly won. 1 year later, as I walked downtown hand in hand with the woman I had fallen for, I saw her. She stood by a cafe window, staring inside as if starved. Thinner, her hair messy, dressed in cheap clothes, nothing like the designer outfits she once boasted about. She looked ruined. Our eyes met. She froze. I simply smiled and walked right past her. Later that night, my phone buzzed with her number. I almost ignored it, but curiosity nudged me. I answered. Silence, came the reply on the other end. Then a shaky breath. You look happy today, she whispered. I said nothing. You're beautiful, she added softly. Still, I waited. Then her voice broke. I wish I never left you. I smiled. I wish you never did either. After a pause that clung to the air like a final hope, I exhaled slowly, letting her cling to that one fragile chance, and then I crushed it. I'd rather not. And then I hung up for the last time. She faded from my life, never calling again, never trying to reach me, never even apologizing, because she knew there was nothing left to say. The divorce was finalized. Her name was erased from my life, legally, emotionally, financially. Yet, in the back of my mind, I sometimes wondered, where is she now? What has become of her? Not out of regret, not out of longing, but because there was a perverse satisfaction in witnessing someone self-destruct. I heard whispers through mutual acquaintances. She had no stable job, drifting from place to place. She tried dating, but nothing lasted, damaged goods, they said. She had lost everything, and no one wanted to piece her life together. Meanwhile, I had rebuilt my career, better than ever. My personal life soared. The woman who once was my wife became nothing more than a fading memory, a lesson learned. I found someone else, a woman who didn't betray me, who didn't lie, a woman who knew my worth. For the first time in years, I wasn't merely surviving, I was truly living. One night, months later, a friend mentioned my ex in conversation. You won't believe what happened to her, he said, leaning forward with a smirk. She's working at a diner, one of those rundown places outside of town. She's a waitress now. I raised an eyebrow. I asked, tell me. He continued, she was the woman who once sneered at normal jobs, who thought she was too good for anything less than luxury, now a waitress. I blinked, then laughed. The irony was too rich. I had to see it for myself. The next evening, I drove to the diner. I walked in and took a seat near the back. Then I saw her, her hair tied back in a faded, ill-fitting uniform. She was cleaning tables, unaware of my presence. I watched, fascinated, as she moved with exhaustion. She looked older, weary. Finally, she noticed me. Our eyes met, and her face went completely pale. She swallowed, visibly shaking, and then she walked toward me. You came here to gloat, she asked softly, standing beside my table. I smirked. I came to see if the rumors were true. She flinched, her fingers tightening around the notepad she held. So, are you happy? I tilted my head. Should I be? She exhaled sharply, looking away. I hate this life, she admitted. I messed up, okay, I lost everything, but I've changed. I said nothing. She hesitated. I know you've moved on, she whispered, but part of me hoped maybe I could fix things. I let the words settle, then leaned in slightly, my voice low. You can't fix what's already dead. Her breath caught, tears welling in her eyes. So that's it? She asked brokenly. I smiled. That's it. Then I stood up and dropped a $100 bill on the table, more than enough to cover my coffee. Keep the change, I murmured, and walked away for the last time. That was the final chapter. She faded into the background, a forgotten regret, and I was free, happier, stronger, unstoppable. In the end, some betrayals are unforgivable, and some people are meant to be left behind.